Hey guys, in this video we're going to be taking a look at the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera Original. I'm going to be highlighting its strengths and its weaknesses so that hopefully you will be able to determine if this camera is worth it for you in 2023. This camera came out in 2013 and retailed for just under $1,000 US. It has a Super 16 size sensor, shoots 1080p HD up to 30 FPS, has 13 stops of dynamic range, can shoot Cinema DNG 12-bit RAW and Apple ProRes up to 422 HQ, and has an active micro four thirds lens mount. Now, why in the age of 12K cameras are we even talking about a camera that can only shoot 1080p? And came out when I was still learning my times tables. First of all, the image quality. The image coming out of this camera is so unique and organic, and it just has a filmic look to it. It's like you're shooting on film, especially when you're looking at things and stuff. And it's just a breath of fresh air compared to cameras shooting 4K, 6K, 8K these days with that clinical digital look to it. Now you can make any camera, any footage look filmic by color grading it right and adding like a film emulation. But this camera just gives that to you straight out of camera. You don't have to do anything to it, and that is just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, ain't it? Second, the codecs this camera has are just awesome. You have Apple ProRes, which is insane at 10-bit, which, that's awesome, and Apple ProRes at 10-bit. I already said that. And 12-bit RAW. This camera came out in 2013, and it has 12-bit RAW. Most modern mirrorless cameras can't even shoot RAW. You have to have an external recorder to do that. So this camera gives you tons of latitude, tons of manipulation in post, which is awesome. Next, this camera is affordable. At the time of making this video, you can pick them up for about $400 to $600. Now you're also gonna need to invest in a rig, so that will set you back more money, but you can just go with a simple small rig. Go with a small rig battery plate, NPF battery, lens with stabilization. You're good to go. Especially compared to modern cameras that are coming out $2-3 grand, you're gonna save your money on this thing. The next great thing about this camera is the lens compatibility. Because of its micro four thirds lens mount, you have a plethora of lenses to choose from. You can shoot with native micro four thirds mount lenses, or you can adapt pretty much every lens under the sun. So you're gonna get a ton of great budget option lenses for this camera. Finally, and what I think is the most attractive feature of this camera, is it makes you slow down. You can't just whip this camera out and start shooting with it. You have to really slow down and make sure your composition's right. Make sure your exposure's right. You don't have slow motion or stabilization to kind of cover a half-baked shot. It's like shooting with film. You have to slow down and be intentional about what you're shooting. And this is gonna increase your skills. You're gonna be able to hone your craft through this. This camera is an excellent tool to learn on. I've learned so much shooting with it, and especially if you're wanting to learn cinematography and become a better filmmaker, it's really gonna hone your craft and make you a better filmmaker. Now for the cons. This list is long, so sit down, get comfortable. First of all, battery life. This camera has horrible battery life. It chews through the internal batteries, so you're gonna need an external battery. Next, the LCD is tiny, dim, and can't articulate. It's just really annoying. It's horrible in direct sunlight, and it'd just be so nice if you could articulate even a little bit. So you're probably gonna need an external monitor to solve that problem. Now, the sensor is tiny, so you're gonna have a crazy crop factor, and the depth of field isn't gonna be quite as shallow as it would be on a full frame camera. Now, full frame is all the rage these days. Everyone wants a full frame camera. But you don't need a full frame camera to make a beautiful image. Not to mention you can put a speed booster on and it'll mitigate that crop and give you speed. Now the camera has no internal stabilization whatsoever, and it's super tiny and light, so you're gonna get a ton of micro jitter. You can solve that by adding some weight, by rigging out the camera, and that's gonna get rid of a lot of that micro jitter. Next, this camera does not perform well in low light. If you need a camera that performs well in low light, go buy a Sony. But if you don't, I just feel like you don't really need to be able to see in the dark. A lot of these modern cameras can see in the dark, but you don't really need them to. And especially if you're using this camera in a studio environment or in a film where you have control of the light, then it's not really that big of a deal. Another con is the menu system. This one, there's really no workaround, it's just bad. If you need to change a setting quickly, it takes a lot of button pushing. You're just gonna have to get used to it. So if that's a big problem for you, find something else. Now this camera is super picky about SD cards, so not every SD card you own is gonna work. The SanDisk Extreme Pro cards work great for this, so if you pick a few of these up, you're good to go. Another drawback of the camera is the micro HDMI port. It's super tiny and super breakable. I've had one break on me before, and it just doesn't really instill confidence in you. You want to just be able to plug your HDMI cable in and not worry about it. But you can buy a cable lock or a cable clamp, and that's going to help remove the stress from the port. Another con is that this camera cannot shoot 4K. Now, I honestly don't consider that a con. If you need 4K, go buy another camera. But the 1080p coming out of this camera is amazing. I've compared it to a lot of 1080p from other cameras, and there's just more detail, it's more organic, it looks way better than other 1080p. Now, you also can upscale. I always upscale all my work to 4K. That takes away some of the softness, sharpens it up a little bit. So there are workarounds to it. But also, the Arri Alexa Classic, the camera they shot the first Avengers film on, only shoots in 1080p. They shot a Hollywood blockbuster in 1080p. You don't need 4K to tell a good story. You don't need 4K to create a beautiful image. So use what you have. 1080p is just fine. Finally, this camera can't shoot slow motion. I don't really care. If you need a slow motion camera, if you do a lot of work that requires slow motion, then buy a slow motion camera. But if you don't, you don't. Like, you don't need slow motion. You don't need slow motion. Say it to yourself, you don't need slow motion. All right, so who's this camera for? If you do a lot of corporate, commercial style videos, if you do a lot of run and gun shooting or are a content creator, this camera is probably not for you. But if you're a beginner to intermediate filmmaker, a cinematographer who's looking to increase their skills, learn how to make better images, then this camera is definitely for you. It's a great tool to learn on, to increase your skills, and to hone your craft. Thanks for watching, guys. If you liked it, you know what to do. Like, subscribe. I appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Apple ProRes and Raw Ha. Mono. I don't know what's going on. I'm getting restless. See this? This is my Arri Alexa. Yeah, it's definitely real. Just don't hold the handle because it will break. This camera came out in 2013.